Hi all, Rebecca Michael here, back with another video. This is probably the most important video of them all because it involves the con bond or narc love scams. So the con bond is a 4-stage abuse cycle, and that is what their love is. I'll get into that. Now, what genuine love is to us involves fidelity, truth, honor, protection, trust, respect. It's enduring, it's patient, it's kind, it forgives, it's deep, and it'll fight for you. It has courage. Now, love to narcs, and I'll get into why in a minute. They're chronic infidels in all of the above and more. Their so-called love is to serve themselves, utterly self-serving. It's not other-centered. It's self-serving. If they love you, they want something from you. They have a use for you. You're either useful or not useful to a narcissist, and I'll explain that as I go along. But they're pathological liars. They have pathological envy. That's what's under the mask. The mask is the pretense of love or fake persona that they're showing you. That's custom made for you. And I'll get into that. They're dishonoring, dishonorable, all the way to desecration, some of them. Utter desecration of everything they become, everyone and everything they become involved with. They're unsafe. They betray. They're dangerous. They betray all. So it's not just you. It's across the board in their track record. If you know their track record, there'll be a lot of estrangements. And this will be due to betrayals on their end, chronically, habitually. They're duplicitous, so they're enemies. But they're usually secret enemies. This is all secret because they don't show this. They show a false persona that mirrors what they think you want to see or hear. So they're flattering, they're charming, etc., and that's very dangerous. They're disrespectful, behind your back, and if they think they can get away with it, to your face. Their love is fleeting and shallow, so it has no depth. They're often rude and impatient, especially if they're, quote, done with you. Their love is momentary, what they're calling love. It's parasitic, so it involves usury. They're predatory, which means exploitation in the literature. They're predatory, they're parasitic, they're after validation. They see people as supply and fuel. And this is due, the reason for this, it's due over time to the brain wiring. It's hardwired in from habitual choices, and it becomes autopilot. So what I've just described above to do with the love, quote, love of narcs or psychopaths or chronic abusers is abuse. Their love describes abuse. It is not what we consider love, and this is where we get confused because we tend to project where we're coming from onto them, and they project the toxic place they're coming from, which is pathological envy, pathological lying, and all of the things I've just mentioned to do with what their love scams are about, onto us. So they think we're doing what they're doing, in other words. And we think that they're doing what we're doing. So our love is genuine. We bond. They attach like a parasite. This is all from the literature, all the literature on domestic violence, on narcissistic abuse, on psychopathy, on narcissism that I've done in 5 years. It's all coming down to the same thing. They're not capable of love. At some point, whether it's nature or nurture, it comes down to being hardwired into the brain. So now they're hardwired for an abuse cycle, which I'll get into in a minute. And this is pathological and therefore irreversible. There's no cure. They're capable of some superficial behavioral changes, but the low empathy, the low conscience or no conscience, no empathy, the callousness, those things don't change. That's hardwired into the brain. Now, without empathy, there are two types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, which they do have, and then there's affective empathy, what's called effective empathy, which is emotional empathy. This they don't have because they're arrested in their development. As I've mentioned in previous videos on envy, malice, other videos I've done, which is what is under the mask, is a pathological liar, an infidel, an arrested, malicious child, basically, that just wants its own way in a bag to put it in. It doesn't care about anything else. It's not other-centered. And they even say that they have basic proto-emotions such as rage, envy. If they're psychopaths, they don't even have fear, so they don't even have that restraint. And those are the things that you need in order to develop conscience. So they don't have, they have either a, depends on the spectrum they're at, but from moderate to severe, high-end psychopath, narc, they're not going to have that. They're not going to have, on the higher end, they're not going to have a conscience at all. So they're playing you. They're pretending. They're scamming you. But they're not capable of doing anything else. So in a way, this isn't personal. You can see it in their track record. They've done this abuse cycle I'm about to get into over and over again over the decades. This is because they're not capable of it. It's literally hardwired in the brain. It's now pathological. And you need to get out. Okay, so both cognitive and affective or emotional empathy are needed for genuine adult love, which is what I described in the start of this video, and for the development of conscience and genuine remorse. They don't have that either. They can feign it if they have a use for you again and they want to recycle you. It will be feigned. They know what you want to hear. They know what they've done, so they know what they need to. They're very, very perceptive at cold reading people. So they have cognitive empathy. But they hide who they are inwardly because they'd never get anywhere if they showed that. So they develop what's called a psychopathic or a con bond that is actually an abuse cycle. And this is on autopilot. They do this with everyone. They idealize, devalue, discard, and hoover or recycle their targets if they have a use for them again. So idealize in ways such as flattery, or they're very perceptive. So whatever they pick up from you, you find will get your guard down so that you'll trust them and let them in and give them your power. Because your trust is your power. You're empowering them when you trust them. And this is why we need to detach, because we need to take our power back and cut them off. They don't have any power other than that. This is why they use people as supply. They need power. They don't have it. They don't have the emotional development. as I've described in other videos, because they take the path of least resistance. So nothing's growing there. It's always aborted. So that means failed relationships, failed work, failed chronically, failed school, failed everything. Estrangements, everything. This is what'll show up. Sometimes with the lower to mid functioning ones, criminal records, history of domestic abuse or violence. These kinds of things will show up in their track record. And as the experts say, the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. So this is habitual and hardwired into them on autopilot. This is literally all they're going to do. It was like Groundhog Day, you know. And each time you let them back in, if they recycle you, this abuse cycle will tend to cycle through faster. And the abuse will progressively get worse and escalate, either behind your back or if they think they can get away with it to your face. But they're always trying to push the envelope, the edge of the envelope of boundaries and deal breakers. Because they're thrill seekers, for one thing. They get a thrill out of this. So the truth is here, we dodged a bullet if we got away, or we booted them finally, enforcing our boundaries, or they left and discarded us in their little abuse cycle here, 4-stage abuse cycle I just mentioned: idealize, devalue, discard, hoover. Now the devaluation is the next stage after what I described as the idealization phase. The devaluation phase can be overt or covert. So, in other words, it can take the covert signs of silent treatment, stonewalling, dismissiveness, going behind your back, smearing behind your back, but saccharine sweet to your face, hauling, you know, the do-gooder thing. But that's not what's going on secretly. They're very secretive. Covert narcs are the worst because they're very secretive about their abuse. They've learned to be very secretive if they're going to keep that target for long. But they need to abuse because they get bored. And so this is thrill seeking. They need chaos. They don't like stability. They don't like goodness. This is all boring to them. Because, you know, there's no chaos and drama. On the more severe levels, they also like to punish and harm, and they get off on humiliating people, and they're literally getting off on this. They're getting dopamine hits in the brain from in other words, they're sadistic and cruel. And this is power to them. This is all about getting power. So it's called a dominance bond as well. And then after the idealization, devaluation stage, the discard stage is next. That's when you're shelved. And they'll be back. It could be months, it could be years. If you're a primary target or an important person in their life, they won't be back for like transient targets that they're just using for the moment or for a stretch of time. But they will be back for empaths. And this can go on for decades. In my case, this went on for 4 decades. I went through this cycle at least 4 times. I was hoovered back in at least 4 times, recycled back in. And the narc then tries to recycle other primary targets, exes, whatever, family, friends that they've discarded and shelved, if they have a use for them again. So it really isn't about us at all. Their validation of us and their invalidation of us is even less about us. It's all about what's serving them in the moment. And that moment can be for years. If they have a use for you for years, you know, maybe you have stability, maybe you have assets, maybe you're very attractive if that's important to them. Whatever it is that's important to them, that's what they're going for. And they're also going for high empathy in their targets and a conscience. So their targets tend to be extremely loyal and protective and empathetic and kind and forgiving. So forgiving does not mean reconciliation. We can forgive, but we need to be careful about reconciliation. Especially if we see a pattern like this, start looking at what they're doing with other targets in their timeline, over their track record. Start looking for things like criminal records. This indicates boundary crossing, violations of boundaries, okay? So personal boundaries, legal boundaries, basic human rights, marital boundaries, which require fidelity or it's not going to work, and truth and honor and all the things that I mentioned that genuine love is. Well, this isn't what they have. What they have is abuse. What we call abuse is what they call love. And this is all to serve themselves. So the truth is, we were trauma bonded, or betrayal bond is another word for it. And in this abuse cycle, they keep us in as we're wanting to get out because the abuse is starting covertly or overtly in the ways I've just mentioned, all the way maybe to domestic violence. They start the intermittent reinforcements, which is what it's called. But what that means is they start the love dosing. And initially, when you get in a relationship with them, it's called love bombing. But if they're getting old or getting older and they're not able to attract supply or targets like they were before, they're going to have to go the friend zone route for however long that target is insisting on it. So, but they're going to be used. They don't love them. They didn't love you. They don't love their family. They don't love their children. They don't love their grandchildren. They don't love anyone. They don't love their parents. They betray them all. That is not love. That is abuse. And that's all they're capable of. They're hardwired into this cycle, this 4-stage cycle. Idealize, devalue, discard, hoover. And if you don't know that, you can blame yourself. And this can lead to all sorts of horrible things, such as suicide. Please don't. Please don't go there. It's not you. You need to cut this toxic person off. Low to no contact. If you have to co-parent with them, or if there's some reason you have to deal with them, because maybe they're family and maybe they're ill and you really don't want to push them over the edge because you have kindness. Well, low contact is important in that case. But by all means, detach yourself emotionally, for sure. These people are not safe, they're dangerous, and they cannot be trusted. They're not capable of love in the way that we understand what love is. They're not capable of it. They're not wired for it. It's pathological what they have. So, and they willfully develop this, so don't feel too sorry for them. Okay? This is their own habitual choices to lie and eventually become hardwired for pathological lying, or liar's brain it's called. Pathologically refused to go the road of sustained effort. Instead, they went the path of least resistance. So that's the lying, cheating, easy way. But it ends up, in the end, with absolutely devastating consequences for them. They tend to end up alone and estranged by all the important people in their lives that matter. So now they're stuck with relative strangers, okay? But the lifelong people in their life know, that have gotten deeply involved with him, know that they have ruined that across the board. So this really isn't you. You have to see this. If they have a track record, you can see it. So the truth is, we were trauma bonded. It's called a betrayal bond. Because they kept love dosing us, and they kept coming back, hoovering. That's the fourth stage, because they had a use for us again, and they told us everything we needed to hear, because we've been so damaged from what they've done, the way they left the discard. Or we've had to boot them out, but there's still a lot of damage there. And so they come back ministering to that. They come back all sorry and all fake remorse. It's all fake. Someone who loves you does not repeatedly, chronically, they're not chronic infidels. And these people are, across the board, to all. Doesn't matter who it is. So, understand, the truth is, we dodged a bullet. Get out and stay out. We love the mask, the false persona. What they presented to us was they know what we think love is. So initially in the beginning, I mentioned what that was. Fidelity, truth, honor, protection, trust, respect, enduring, patient, forgives, deep, fights for you. That's what they'll present. But under the mask flips. It's pretense. They know how to pretend. So underneath the mask, it's the opposite. It's dishonor, pathological lying, betraying, unsafe, disrespectful of your boundaries, of your deal breakers. In fact, they get a thrill out of crossing them. Partly because they know they're harming you. They know that this is traumatic to you. And they're getting off on that. They're feeling power. So there's no way to have a relationship with these people. If you're a doormat, they don't respect you. They get bored over time with stability and goodness. This bores them. If you're a more assertive target, they're going to keep trying to up the ante, and it's going to possibly get very dangerous into domestic violence and or possibly even murder. Some of these people murder. Or they'll go covertly behind your back and betray you and smear you and be saccharine sweet to your face and ingratiating and doing all these things for you. But they don't mean a damn thing of it. They're just trying to manipulate you, get your trust and your guard down so that you let them in to your trust, into the sacred places of your heart. And that's where the power is. And that's what they want to extract as fuel. They're parasites. And then once they've used you up, you're shelved. If you're an important target, you're shelved. And they'll be getting back to you repeatedly. And they do all this to avoid accountability as well. They know what they are. They know what they're doing. But at some point, they can't stop. They can't change. They're incapable of love. They attach. They don't bond. They didn't love us. They don't love the next person. They didn't love the last person. So it's not about us at all. And that'll help you let go. You need to detach and let them go. Because our love was real. But we didn't love what and who they are under the mask because we were deceived. We did not know we were scammed. That's the only way they got us, is that we were scammed in some form or another. And I'll get into their manipulative tactics in another video. Okay, so that was hard, but that's the worst of it. If you can get through that, you'll be okay. And you can. Just self-care, baby steps. And I'll be doing lots of videos on post-traumatic growth, things like that. They can actually end up promoting us. The Judas kiss, you know, ends up promoting us to a higher level than ever before of everything they envied in us, or even more of all of that. So, take care.